Hi, I'm Paul Farnsworth. Welcome to the Tech Connect podcast. We talk about all topics related to technology and recruiting and finding a job that might be relevant. Today, we have Mike Pitta joining us from Guild. We're going to talk about the changes in both how training is delivered in the age of AI, but also what employees are doing to learn more about skills and get ready for change, and then what employers are investing in and what they're looking for from their employee base as they deploy training to ready everybody for AI and changes to how we all do work. Well, thank you, Mike, for joining. I wonder if you might just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what Guild does for those that may be listening that aren't familiar with Guild as an organization.
Absolutely. First of all, Paul, thanks for having me. Mike Pitta, I am a talent principal here at Guild. What that means, what I do for Guild is I spend time doing our executive recruitment as well as some broad-based recruitment across our technology team. In my flex role, I also have spent some time in AI enablement. So for the last 6 months, I've been part of our AI enablement squad internally at Guild to help employees make the most of the AI tools and technologies that we have. When it comes to what Guild does for business, we unlock opportunity for the American workforce. What does that mean in practice? We provide education benefits and different skilling products that let companies train, grow, and reskill their workforce.
Very good. And I will say, as a casual observer of the training platforms and industry, and I'm a career technologist, so I've been through quite a lot of waves of training and technology change. AI seems to be something which is adapt at disrupting training in a more traditional sense. So how just talk a little bit about how Guild has reacted to the kind of the next generation of AI that's suddenly popped on the market in the last year or so.
Absolutely. It's interesting. The learning and development space is changing a lot. So one thing that we're seeing is there's a shift towards continuous on-demand learning rather than episodic training that has happened historically. You're seeing companies want to increase their investment in AI literacy, data fluency, and it's not just for their technology teams, but it's across all roles. You're seeing a bigger focus on credentialing and pathways that way that align to like internal mobility, micro degrees, apprenticeships, and companies are actually integrating learning into their performance cycles. And so they're tying skill development directly to career progression. Okay.
I guess there's both in all aspects of AI, there's opportunity and peril here a little. I have a freshman in college, and AI in learning is something that we talk about a lot in terms of the implications on both sides. Do you think this creates an opportunity to accelerate the kinds of trainings that Guild has to offer, or is it going to get to a point where it's overwhelming? There's so much stuff you can learn.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the answer is yes, and I think everyone is figuring that out right now in terms of what the right modalities, if you will, to obtain skills are. It's something that I think we've observed as a company and why we're offering different types of products. I don't think the degree is going to go away necessarily. I think that's maybe 30, 50 years from now. But in the here and now, it is still valued by our employers and employer partners, and they want to see other ways that one can develop new skills and obtain new skills.
Now, I'm also an avid technologist. So I wonder, do you think we'll get to a point, last question on Guild, and then we'll talk about the impact for employers. Do you think we'll get to a point where I can have Brad Pitt deliver my training through an AI avatar?
It's a good question. Digital twins come up a lot internally at Guild with customers, things of that nature. I will say I'm skeptical. I think there's, both ethical questions there, and I think there is something important about having a human in the loop and a human teaching you. I'm actually going through a Guild for Guild course right now. One of my favorite things is I actually have a mentor and a human that I can go back and forth with and have these conversations. But
a human.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Here's a question I'm going to ask you towards the end of the podcast: is if there was a celebrity that that was going to deliver you training, who would it be? Don't answer that now. You think about it.
I can think about it. Great.
Yeah, think about it. Okay, so the other part of this is that companies are also thinking about the transition. There's a lots in the press about AI disrupting jobs. What kind of thing are you hearing from employers that are coming to think about transformation of their workforce with AI?
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't speak about obviously like specific customers, but we are seeing things where they're wanting to see more around like the soft skills, interestingly enough, especially even with like engineers, technologists. How are we looking at things like communication skills across our engineering teams? How are we thinking about critical thinking, about problem solving? Less so about the like the hands-on, very tactical, technical things, i.e., how good you are with Python or Java or things of that nature, but more about how you're interacting and engaging and integrating with your workforce. And so we're seeing a lot of demand for those types of skills and courses that can help train folks on that.
And then, as you think about training for transformation, what kind of things are employers looking for from Guild in terms of course materials or the ability to enable their workforce to adapt to AI?
This is like a leading question in some ways. Adaptability is key right now. So we're seeing things around how do you build adaptability? How are you looking at resiliency in your workforce? We actually released a really interesting talent resiliency index. It's free. Go download it. I don't know if I'm allowed to make that plug, but you can edit it if need be. But it's actually quite fascinating where we talk a lot about resilience and the resilience that's needed in the workforce. And it is a skill that can be built up and one that has to be kind of honed in with folks because things are going to continue to change and pivot. I mean, you are a technologist yourself. You know that I feel like every week, as part of my AI enablement work, I'm like ready to talk about how we're going to set you up for success on GPT-5, and then 5.2 comes out, and then Gemini 3 comes out, and we're like, wow, how do we actually train people on this? So being adaptable and resilient, and we have courses that are like aligned to that.
Do you think that employers are looking to train? I mean, obviously, workforce training and development has been something that companies have been doing for a long time. This is not new behavior. I think that what I've observed over my career is there used to be this idea of these large training centers. You used to go through these big development programs and you'd kind of stay with the company for a long time. How does that shift where there seems to be more mobility with employees between companies? How do companies find that balance between investing for the future, making sure that they're retaining those employees that they've trained?
So it's interesting. We do see that in the data that folks are, and it's in that report that I mentioned, that folks are, often leaving their company, especially more junior folks, because they don't see that internal mobility. But the interesting counter to that is if you do invest in those employees, we see data that says they actually will stay longer. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to stay with your company. And a lot of that comes down to the training that is offered and, the fact that it is, very targeted and specific to the type of work that needs to be done. And so it's a little bit of a paradox in some way that if you don't offer that, people will leave. But if you do offer it, we're seeing in data that, folks are staying a little bit longer.
So would you say from your experience, you're seeing companies obviously they're training more on AI, but do you think that shifts, like you said, to the soft skill curriculums and it's less about the core technology and more about how do you adapt to change and implement, which, by the way, I think is a durable skill for any employee for the future?
It is. And I think what makes that tricky, and just, again, this is more anecdotal than like a specific data point I've got in front of me, but I've heard more and more from both engineering leaders that I work with internally and externally that a lot of the low-level coding tasks are being automated with a lot of the IDEs that are out there, and so a lot of it is shifting to either, again, the soft skills that are needed, or is it to like the higher order skills, things like system design, architecture, decision frameworks, things like that you might get as a senior or a principal or something like that engineer, but it's expected, maybe a little bit further down in the stack. And so I think, reinforcing some of the fundamentals when it comes to technologist skills are really important as well. And not just, the tasks of coding, so to speak.
Yeah, no, understood. Okay. Shifting gears a little to the employee side. What do you think you're seeing in terms of changes in employee attitude around AI? I think that there's definitely occupations where there's some concern. Do you advocate people embracing it to see? Do you think there's still a need for some caution? What do you think what's your perspective on where employees should be?
So I'll take my recruiting hat off, put my AI enablement hat on. Yeah. I think we are seeing that in the data that like folks, again, are still feeling a lot of anxiety. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my role? What does it mean for my career ladder? Which I think is perfectly normal with any new technology and any change that is to be expected. What we're trying to encourage people to do is that, to sometimes get through that anxiety, you need to continue to use the tools, try the tools, understand the limitations, what works well, what doesn't. We're also seeing some, interesting things where, one of the most valuable things here is that by having more connectivity to the business and the actual business users, especially employees who are doing the day-to-day work, we are starting to see a lot of the limitations that exist around AI. And maybe it's like a more of an understanding like, okay, this is pretty far off from taking my job, but certain tasks are certainly going to be taken, and I can actually help shape what that looks like versus, wait for it to happen to me. So I think being proactive and understanding the limitations and what tools and things are happening out there is pretty important for folks, especially to overcome some of that anxiety. And to your point, it's not consistent role to role. There are certainly some aspects of businesses that are feeling it more so than others.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask two sets of questions from a slightly different perspective. If you're earlier in your career, how do you recognize training slop? Is that a term? I just made that up. It's like AI slop, but for training. How do you recognize the difference between good quality training and training slop? Because there's an opportunity to have a lot of training slop out there, right?
That is a great question. And listen, there is no shortage of content that is being creative. I think I saw a statistic recently that there is now more AI content on the web than there is human generated content.
Oh boy, that's a lot of slop.
Yeah, that's not great. There are telltale signs of like something being written by AI, M dashes, those types of things that folks have certainly identified. I think it's tricky. I think, the models have also gotten a lot better at writing. Ultimately, what I would recommend to junior folks is like, what is the outcome you're driving towards? Like, what are you trying to learn? Like, what are your goals? Whether it's written by a human primarily or by an AI, I've gotten some great advice and learnings from AI tools. So like, don't discount it because it was generated by AI, but ultimately what is the outcome and the problem you're trying to solve, and anchor towards that versus like how it was created. And I think that's key to making those decisions.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second part of that question is, if you're a little bit later in your career and you may be rolling your eyes a tad at some of this and waiting for people to learn the limitations, how do you help coach people kind of push through that a little bit and be open to exploring where they may be a little resistive?
I will give a plug to our internal network that we've developed here at Guild. We call it our AI Champions Group. We're about a company of about 850 or so folks, about 30 champions, and that is spread across different functional areas, different levels, but primarily I'd say like the mid to junior with a few senior folks sprinkled in. But what we found really helpful there is having folks internally that can help champion that work and like what it looks like, and encourage their team members, especially the more resistant team members, more senior team members. I've gone through different types of these hype cycles, whether it be like the automation cycle and things like that, to really try it out and get them on board. The top-down approach, while it's important to have, I think, senior leaders saying like AI is great and we all should use it, it also is really helpful to have some of those junior folks or more mid-level folks encourage them, and someone that's like a peer or a trusted advisor versus an external resource, for example. And so that's been really helpful, and it has encouraged folks to say like, oh, hey, there actually is value. I see this other great person I work alongside actually get value from this.
Could you give me an example, that you might be willing to share internally about where you've seen some of these tools at Guild actually work at scale? Because I think there's definitely a sense that certainly there's been some reports from MIT that these experiments work in a very narrow context, but when you try to scale it, it's more difficult. Do you have an example where it's starting to work at scale?
Yes. And I'll canvas this with like, we have a strong hypothesis this will work at scale because it's worked at like somewhat scale. One has been interview note taking, for example, and automating that part of it. Dice is a great platform for identifying talent. And, one of primary jobs of recruiters to do phone interviews. I am a terrible note taker. I know a lot of other recruiters who are not great note takers. Having someone that does that task for me, something that does that task for me has been super helpful. People were skeptical at first. They're like, I'm a great note taker. I'm going to, just do my thing. Once we implemented that with our recruiters and got some champions on board, they've been excited. We're now rolling it out to the entire business to try it out, because we think there's going to be, higher quality interviews, better notes captured, things like that. That'll be really helpful. And that started as a pilot. We started to scale it up. And now we're actually in the implementation phase across the business. And so we're excited about that. I know that doesn't fully answer your question of like good examples. There's a couple other internal ones that I don't think I'm allowed to talk about, externally quite yet.
That's okay. There's always things just coming. So I want to pick a little bit on, let's dig into interviewing just a second and bring back something that you said early on around credentialing, because I think that's the other thing that we're starting to see as an industry, particularly on the recruiting side, where AI is very good. Just the interview notes are great, but it's also very good at tailoring resumes and experience to job descriptions, and that gap is getting smaller, which means that there's more demand for credentialing and interviewing. How do you think about what's going to be required to make sure that the candidates are presenting accurate information about what their skill set is, and how does credentialing play into that?
You are speaking about the thing that keeps me up at night the most. I call it the signal collapse that we're experiencing right now, with resumes being so laser focused on the job description that they all tend to look similar, and folks' skills just seem like a perfect match. I think credentialing is one piece of it. I think one of the other things that'll be really important going forward is interviewers are going to have to get really good at filtering out the noise and actually focusing in on things like credentials and the actual job to be done and the things that this person has delivered. And candidates are going to have to get really, really good and comfortable being, their most authentic selves when it comes to like what they've delivered, where they have a credential that might fill in certain gaps, and where there are still opportunities for them to learn, and being ultimately really truthful about where they are. I think we're going to go through a messy period though with folks again trying to tailor things so specifically, and hiring managers and others maybe getting frustrated with some of the noise that's out there.
Yeah, I think we're at an interesting part where there's a little bit of tension between wanting employees who embrace AI and are willing to use that as part of their tool set, but not demonstrate it in the process of job interviewing and that initial part, because it's hard to say what's real and not real. I don't know whether Guild in particular have come up with any strategies around AI and interviewing remote candidates, but that's another area that we're seeing some. I think what you said is that signal collapse. It's difficult to see where AI is being used or not being used.
Yeah, and we do have something we're mid implementation on, like something that just help with the fake candidate situation that is out there. So, we have, again, a strong hypothesis. We have a solution that's going to be implemented. But, what I'm seeing now is, candidates are getting more sophisticated on how to even bypass those things. So it's a little bit of a battle right now.
Little battle. Okay, I'm going to ask a couple questions around training. I've certainly been a manager for a long time, implemented training programs at scale in organizations. Return on investment's always one of those question marks you get when you start investing in training. Just talk a little bit about what you think the growth of training in the enterprise looks like over the next couple of years. Do you think companies are going to continue to manage their budgets? Do you think there's going to be reinvestment in that as part of this wave of change in technology?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think what's exciting is where Guild is positioned as a company. I think we're well positioned for like the pending changes that will happen because of the AI boom, so to speak. If you look at things like how demographics are shifting in the U.S. and how the workforce is aging, these are things that we speak about and think about. There is going to be a need for companies to invest in their employees, regardless of short-term budget constraints and things like that. When we think about ROI, we have done studies internally that show for every dollar invested, they often see, I think it's a 3x return on investment when it comes to, actually investing in their employees, upskilling and growth. And so, as we continue to uncover like where there is value in training, we're going to encourage companies to do that. And we're going to make sure that we're really focused on outcomes-based learning in terms of like, how is this actually driving business value, whether it be through retention, whether it be through, just again, the resiliency that happens by investing in your employees, and just like the value you get from having that, internal knowledge that stays with you for a long time.
Okay. And then if you were going to identify, we'll talk to individuals, technologists, just for a second. You talked about where companies are seeing value in some of the softer, durable skill training. If you were going to give technologists some advice around what to prioritize to learn next year, to help kind of protect them from some of this change and strengthen their career over the next couple of years, what would be your top sort of 3 or 4 skills they should work on next year?
Great question. So the things that we've seen demand on, communication, really strong. And when I say communication, not just communicating to technical stakeholders, we're seeing a lot of demand, for things like forward deployed engineers. You're seeing more and more of that job description that comes out there. So you might be sitting with a customer. So getting comfortable talking to your customers, especially non-technical stakeholders, is really important. The other things that we're seeing, I mentioned problem solving, critical thinking. Those are things that you hear at a high level, and like, what does that mean in practice? How do you break down a problem into their smaller parts and actually solve them? And thinking that you're very business focused. So, I interview or screen engineers, at least, oftentimes. One of my questions I like to ask is like, what impact did this have on the business? Or, how would you say this impacted the business? You often don't see a great answer there. And so like getting yourself really that business fluency, like, why are we doing the things that we're doing and how is that impacting the business? I know you said 4, but I think one other thing to throw in there is around, systems thinking. And we're seeing more and more demand for like, how do you, again, break down these problems into, more structured processes and thinking.
Yes, and I'm going to double down on the what's in it for the business. And I'm going to ask very nicely for our technologist community to not just plug it in ChatGPT and see what it says, but to actually kind of dig deep and figure out what the real implications are. Otherwise, you're going to end up probably with kind of a wrong answer there, I suspect. So, okay, last couple of questions. As you think about education changing, how do you think employees make sure that they are participating in programs for further education?
Yes. I don't think I can't tell them to go out and demand that their company buys Guild. I mean, that might be one. Yep. Take advantage of the opportunities that are presented from an education standpoint, whether they be formal or informal, is the strongest thing I could recommend. Having the gumption and the willingness to go out and learn something new, especially if it's something you're really uncomfortable with, shows incredible initiative to, your leadership and teams. And so, just what are you looking at? And like what, again, based on what you're hearing and what you're seeing from business leaders as to what the most important skills are, making sure that you're tying that back to the jobs, the job to be done, so to speak. I think there's always that connective tissue that needs to happen from like the individual to the business. And if you don't know, you should ask and be like, what, that's where a great people leader, a great manager, you've managed teams, being willing to ask your manager, like, hey, what do you think are the things that I need to learn to be successful in both this role and the next roles that I want to get to? And having an idea, your next role might not be the next rung up the ladder. It might be something tangential. It might be something that doesn't even exist yet, because that's something we're definitely dealing with, is like, what are the new jobs that are going to be out there in the next 5 to 10 years that we're not even aware of yet?
Yeah, and I've talked about this a lot when we talk about technologists and any employee, really, about managing their career. It really comes down to you manage your own career. Coming into those cycles of review meetings with your manager with some framework or an idea of where you want to head is incredibly helpful. Stops the blank stares and this idea that you're just being, you don't want to be led, you want to lead through your career. So I agree completely with that. So,
yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
So I've given you plenty of time to think about the answer to this. Who's it going to be?
Celebrity teaching a course. I'll go with Russell Crowe.
Really, Russell Crowe? Because you think why? Tell me why Russell Crowe?
prior to my prior life before Guild, I was working in a media entertainment company that may have produced the movie Gladiator. And that's
I see.
Been near and dear to my heart. And, there's something about his style and approach to life that I think would resonate well with me. And I would definitely I would be entertained. I'll say that much.
You'd be entertained. Excellent. I think I'm coming to the same training course as you are. So I'll be there along with you too as well. All right. One last question just to close. As you think about the future, AI and training, any sort of wild predictions that you have in terms of where you think we're going as an industry?
Yes. My wild prediction is that all humans at some point, or anyone that wants to be a learner, continue to learn, will likely have a very personalized AI companion riding alongside them to help them learn and grow. And oftentimes right in the moment, i.e., hey, Mike, or hey, Paul, this looks like a great opportunity for you to learn something new. You could have approached this problem differently. And I think that's, that AI assistant, that always on learning assistant will be real probably in the nearish future is my guess. When I say nearish future, let's say a 5-year time horizon.
That's very interesting. And I could see a path to that because my Amazon Alexa is always asking me if I want to listen to new music that's just been released. So hopefully it'll be more useful than that. So,
Mike, it'd be better if it said, Paul, what would you like to learn today? Or I think it'd be great if you learned this today based on what you've been searching for online.
I think everyone should try and learn one thing a day. That's my other pitch. So, well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to seeing how Guild evolves, and hopefully we'll get everybody trained and ready for the AI future that's on us now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today.